Hi, my name is James Andriella, and you are listening to the Back to Human podcast. On today's show, we are going to dive into the world of Voltopolis, a fictional metropolis created by today's guest and author of Earth and Water, which is a freaking tome of a book or books, as you can see here, regarding earthing and grounding. And while the city may not exist in reality, at least by name, I believe it's a very good representation of modern day city life and how disconnected and distant we are from nature and our source. In today's episode, we will be discussing one of my absolute favorite topics, earthing, also known as grounding, and all the benefits that can be reaped from consciously reconnecting with the earth. Joining me on the show today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Robert Ironshell, which is a really badass name, by the way. He's also known as the Grounded Athlete, aka Earthpapi. Without further ado, Rob, Earthpapi, welcome to the show, brother.
James, I'm glad to be here. I always love going on people's shows and talking a little bit of grounding. It's fun getting the word out there and helping people.
Yeah, man. I've been really excited to dig in this topic. Out of all the health hacks that I've tried over the previous years, grounding would be my top recommendation. My feet are on a grounding mat as we speak. I've been sleeping grounded personally for the past 6 years or so. And it's one of the first recommendations that I give to every single one of my clients. Not all of them adhere to it. Not all of them really believe in it. I haven't really gotten into grounded footwear yet. I do have a pair of some grounded sandals, but I didn't really find them too comfortable. I know that you, I didn't mention before, are a cobbler or a shoemaker, and you make grounded footwear as well. So I hope to learn a little bit more about that during this chat. And yeah, man, I've been following you for a while now, and I could tell that you're really passionate about this. You post up some really great content, some funny content too. I really get a kick out of like all your memes. I just saw what you were posting in your stories. And then, what was it the other day? Something that's like, it was why are balls stitched?
Yeah.
Yep, that's how we know that God made us, because our balls are stitched. And I thought that was great. That's actually a question that I've pondered myself. Why are balls stitched? So you post up some funny stuff, man.
Yeah, it definitely makes what I do fun. And I think that draws a lot of people to what I'm doing. I mean, it is really cool to teach people and to kind of share all the content related to grounding and do that side of things. But it's also like, I like to kind of squeeze myself into there a little bit. And that's what makes it fun for me. And I get to like insert my personality, and I don't have to kind of be a robot, because a lot of people, when they see my business, they don't see like a business, they see more of a person as well. So that's kind of why I like to have a little bit more fun on social media than maybe other people.
Yeah, no. Yeah. You show your personality, and meanwhile, you're very professional at the same time. So it's a nice blend of both.
Thank you.
Now, is your, I think I might have read it on your stories one day. Was your grandfather like a researcher or a scientist? Don't you come from?
No, I was just tweeting about some old physicists like Richard Feynman, Maxwell, and all that. I just like to say I'm descended from them because I adore reading about them, and I have many books, biographies about them. So I just try and in my mind put myself with them, and kind of that's a little bit inspiring for me because I also studied physics as well, but I'm nowhere near that echelon of existence. Or previous existence. But yeah, it's now that we're talking about my grandpa, and you mentioned my last name earlier, my last name actually comes from a chief. It was Chief Ironshell. And so that just turned into my last name. So that's how I got that last name. So
Badass. So we both have a Native American background. My last name is Six Killer, or my born name is Six Killer. I'm
awesome.
adopted, so.
Sweet,
yeah, once I found that out, I was like,
which tribe? Cherokee? Sweet, man. Cherokee. That's so cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Once I found out what my birth name was, because I'm adopted again, in the neonatal unit, because I was a preemie, they didn't have a name for me, so they just put like this tag on my my crib or whatever it was, and it said Fox Six Killer. Like, it's pretty badass. I want to adopt that name.
You gotta figure out a way to stick that back in the name a little bit.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
I will one day. So tell me a little bit about your upbringing, brother. I know that you have some native in you, some native tribe in you, and how did you come about grounding yourself?
Okay. Yeah. I grew up on the Rosebud Reservation in Rosebud, South Dakota, Lakota Sioux, Rosebud tribe. That's where I'm an enrolled member. But yeah, I spent a lot of my childhood on the reservation until my mom eventually moved us off the reservation. I moved to a small town in Iowa, and that's where I went to middle school and high school, and further on when I went to college for undergrad and graduate school. And after I'd finished school, I was still competing in track and field. I just kind of kept doing it because if you're good at track, the cool thing about it is that you can keep competing in it. And so I've been doing that since I left school. I've been running the 400 meters for like 15 years now. But I came to a point where I was starting to run into some injuries and stuff, as most athletes do as they get older, and as they age, the body kind of wears down a little bit. I was just looking for ways to better my performance, to better my recovery. And kind of the same way that you came across grounding, you mentioned Clint Ober. I was listening to a podcast one day coming back from a training session, and he was talking about this whole grounding thing. And I was very skeptical. I was just like, this sounds like bullshit. It sounds very like hippie. Like, I'm going to go outside and be barefoot and all these things are going to happen to my body. It just didn't really click for me, but I was like, okay, I'm open to it. I will look into it and I will start integrating it a little bit in my life. I started sleeping grounded. I started taking my lunch breaks grounded. I started warming up and cooling down grounded. In between my training reps, I would take my spikes off and I would be grounded. And I noticed immediately how much better my training sessions were going, how much better I was sleeping, and just my overall mood and energy levels. Everything just improved significantly. And from that point on, I was kind of hooked. And so I decided I wanted to learn everything I could possibly learn about this process, because from there I learned just the immense implications of not having this practice in your life. And I just wanted to help people by trying to learn everything I could possibly learn and give that to people. So that's initially how I started doing what I'm doing, is I was making like these long format videos for people, basically like conglomerating and assimilating all this information, these research papers and all that, and all the surrounding information, and making that available for people in a digestible manner.
Yeah, I feel like you've done that very well on the book too, which has, even though it's massive, for anyone that may be interested in purchasing, it's loaded with pictures as well, which I've kind of found, maybe it's my vision, but when I take pictures of them, because I was going to share some of them, I didn't want to leak too much prior to this interview, but they look so much better on the phone than actually in person. It's pretty cool. Yeah. And they're nice and vivid. Yeah. Clint, I've actually had him previous on the show. He's one of the first people that I heard about talking about this too, which I fanboyed when I had him on, bro. And I know you mentioned him several times throughout the book. He's the OG of grounding. And what I noticed personally with my athletes too is pretty much exactly what you stated, that your recovery and your performance was just on another level after introducing this stuff. As I mentioned before, the introduction, I used to work with a bunch of athletes, college athletes, NFL players. And during training camps, one of my best friends actually, once I put him onto this, he mentioned that he would get like 5 hours of sleep, but it felt like 9. And he was actually able to recover for the next day after like a brutal training day. This was his rookie year, so they go really, really hard on the rookies. And then also my college athletes, they mentioned as well, it's a game changer. Yeah. And I'm surprised more athletes don't know about this, which lo and behold, your name is The Grounded Athlete, at least your Instagram handle. And I think that's one of the groups that could really benefit the most from this.
Yep.
So what exactly did you see in your training? You noticed that your performance was better. Were you getting a sore?
Usually after my training sessions, I these were like, 100%, like in the 90 to 100% percentile for my sprinting. And usually after those sessions, I would walk away just kind of body broken down. I would feel it the next day. So there were two kind of ways I was realizing how much this was benefiting me. One of the ways was my soreness levels, especially the next day. I would wake up usually when I wasn't grounding, the next day I would be a dead body. Like I wouldn't be able to do like anything. But when I started implementing this practice, I was like, oh, I woke up and I feel like I could repeat the workout that I did the day before. And so like that was one of the first things I noticed. I was like, okay, there's definitely something here. And then I used pretty kind of higher level timing equipment to like track all of my stuff. And I did notice I did run some experiments like throughout my season when I was timing myself, when I was taking those grounding breaks in between my intervals, taking my spikes off and going out and be in the grass. And when I wouldn't, one, I would feel a lot better in the rep, and then two, the times were faster. So those were kind of two of the metrics that I was using to kind of gauge how grounding was affecting my performances. But yeah, those are two of the biggest things, and sleep was obviously a big part of that because I was sleeping so much deeper, I was sleeping so much better, and that, you know, as you know, plays a huge aspect in recovery and performance. So
You make shoes, so maybe you could be able to answer this question because I wear just straight Vivo barefoot shoes, and I actually reached out to them a few years ago. I was like, I want to make grounding shoes. Meanwhile, that's kind of how the universe works. It's like if you have this idea out there, boom, it's going to land in your lap. It may not be right away, but eventually you'll find exactly what you're looking for.
Mhm.
Did you ever try like barefoot sprints, not on the track, but maybe if there's like grass field in the middle of it? Have you ever tried that in the medium?
So for me on grass, it's very tricky because sometimes, like I've tried it a few times, sometimes if it's just not completely level and you take a wrong step and it really it can really destroy your body. But I do it on turf, even though I'm not grounded on turf. But I do notice how much more fluid my body moves when I don't have any shoes off and I'm running on something like turf. And I don't have something like shoes, you know, hindering all of my joints when I'm striking the ground. Like it's a big difference in how I'm sprinting and how my body is moving. But I don't do it as much on regular grass just because like I have to kind of worry about those dips and rises in there, and it's difficult. But if you're just your everyday runner and just running on grass without shoes, I think is awesome. It's really good for developing foot strength, and feeling how your body is meant to be striking the ground like naturally. Because, you know, when you're in normal shoes, like that's just not a natural gait. At the end of the day, it's not a natural way to walk. So, but unfortunately for me, I'm in a sport where it's a lot of pounding on a synthetic flat rubber surface. So it's kind of sad because I kind of have to compensate for that with actual running shoes. And that's kind of where I run into like a lot of issues with the barefoot community. It's that, you know, while these shoes are destroying our bodies, they're destroying our feet, they're making our feet weaker, the whole body weaker. We're also in contact with these surfaces that aren't natural every day. These flat, hard surfaces, wood surfaces, concrete, all these. And so we've kind of pushed ourselves into this uncomfortable situation where we have to compensate for that. And so like, while I'm not a 100%, you know, pro completely barefoot flat shoe, I think you need some cushion in there, especially with today's surfaces. So that's kind of where I'm at with the whole barefoot thing too. So
Do you think it'd be possible for you to create at least like a wider toe box spike? Or
for
do you
sure.
think that there is some type of ergonomic benefit to wearing the narrow toe box spikes?
Yeah, I could definitely a wider toe box spike. It's probably not something I do, but somebody eventually will probably end up doing it. A wide toe spike, a wide toe cleat, which it'd be good for cleats because you can ground like if you're playing on a natural football like surface and stuff like that. But I mean on a track, you're still not going to be you're grounded or anything. But I'm sure someone will come along and develop the spikes or cleats. It's not anywhere kind of in my mind right now. So
Figured I'd ask. Yeah. When I was working with teenage boy and I was just getting into the whole grounding scene, I would take him out to the park and I would have him run barefoot, like on these hills. It wasn't like full speed or anything like that, but what I noticed is if I trained him out at the hills or if I trained him out at the beach, his energy was through the roof. Like he was actually able to do quite a bit of work, quite a bit of volume. Meanwhile, if I took him indoors under like some crappy LED lighting, synthetic turf, synthetic rubber, he was gassed the moment he did like a single Versa climber sprint. He just did not have the same capacity that he did when he was barefoot. And I was like, there's something to this. Something to this.
Many such cases. I noticed the exact same thing when I have to switch to indoor training because it snows a lot here and can't train outside. So just like my workouts outside are so much insanely just better than they are when I have to go to an indoor track and run under these artificial light sources. And on top of that, you have more acute curves and everything in there. But yeah, it's not the best training environment for sure. So I totally get what you're saying, and that totally makes sense to me. So.
Well, what are the mechanisms here at play that are helping with your performance as an athlete then?
Okay. Yeah. So one of the biggest things that's happening when you're grounded and you're training at the same time, or just recovering grounded, but one of the biggest things that happens is essentially a blunted immune response. And so I've written about that in the Earth and Performance chapter, where basically they noticed all of these differences in immune cell markers, neutrophils, creatine kinase levels, blood urea nitrogen. There's all these different things that essentially indicate that what's happening when you're training grounded is your body is breaking down. It's not breaking down as much as when you're training insulated. And someone could obviously retort me and say that, well, you want the body to break down a little bit and you want that inflammation there because that's how you grow and everything. And so how I would respond to that is that how we train today insulated is an unnatural way of training. And the inflammation that creates in our body, the oxidative stress that creates in our body is more excessive than it needs to be. And I think that's why we get more sore than we need to be when we're training. We can still adapt the same amount, but be less sore and experience less inflammation. So that's kind of where I'm at with training grounded versus training insulated. But yeah, again, it's essentially a muted, it's a blunted immune response, and that allows you to train longer, allows you to train harder, allows you to recover better. So
what materials then would be conductive? We have the synthetic surfaces, the turf. You can't ground there. You can't ground on the rubber turf or the rubber track as well. So what would be conductive? What would allow us to ground, and what would prevent us from grounding?
Yeah. So like this is one of the top two questions in this whole world of grounding. And that's it. That's where am I grounded? Where can I ground? Where can I not ground? And it all comes down to electrical insulators, electrical conductors. So essentially if whatever you're standing on is considered an electrical conductor, and it's in direct contact with the earth or indirectly, it's still kind of directly, like these grounding mats are directly connected to the earth outside. But the main idea is to be in direct electrical contact with the surface of the earth. And that's done through conductors. And so insulators, they don't allow that to happen. So the main difference between electrical conductors and electrical insulators is that an electrical conductor, basically, it doesn't hold on to its electrons very tight. And that allows electricity to pass through it much easier than, say, an insulator, because what an insulator does is it holds on to its electrons very, very tight. And so electrical energy can't get through it as easy. And kind of in between there, you have semiconductors and everything. But, and that maybe we can eventually get to that too. But, yeah, that's really what it comes down to knowing when you're grounded or not. If all else fails, multimeters are very cheap. You could test if a surface is grounded. But what I always tell people is, it's a Google search away. You look up what you're standing on and you look it up in Google. Is this surface conductive? It says yes, you're grounded. So like two easy examples of that. One would be concrete. If I pull up my phone and I look up what concrete's made of, it's made up of mostly mineral and water, which is electrically conductive, especially if you get it wet. To take another example, if I'm outside, I'm standing on asphalt. What is asphalt made of? It's mostly a petroleum-based polymer, which is very insulating. So grounded on concrete, not grounded on asphalt.
So with the concrete, even if it's like 12 inches thick instead of something that's really, really thin?
Yeah, there are some factors that play into that as far as, thickness, dryness. There's a lot of things that contribute to the overall resistance of a material. But most surfaces I think you're going to be okay. Composition and thickness definitely make a difference, but I think in most places you're going to be okay as far as grounding goes.
Now, would there be like levels to this where you're better off being on the grass as opposed to concrete? Or is it like, as long as you're grounded, you get the benefit no matter what?
Yeah. So what I notice, at least when I use my multimeter, I don't notice any difference in my body voltage levels when I'm on concrete versus when I'm on soil or grass. It might happen quicker when you're on grass or soil than it would be like if you're on concrete. Whereas if you're on concrete, the body voltage will drop a bit more gradually, but eventually you will get to that same point that you're at when you're on soil or grass. So what I would say is that being on grass and being on soil is a more efficient way to do it. And the most efficient way to do it of all the different methods is to be in a natural body of water. That is the most efficient way to ground. So because water is filled with all these minerals and ions that conduct electricity, and they kind of make it a surefire way of being grounded. Whereas, if you're not in water, when you're dealing with soil and concrete and all that, you have to deal with all these other different factors that contribute to the material or the surface's electrical resistance.
This might sound very off the wall, but it's been a idea of mine for quite some time. Is there a way to make grounding like portable where, say for instance, okay, you make the grounding shoes, which we'll get into in a little bit, like how exactly you do that. But say for instance, you can't be on the ground or you're in an airplane. We're going to be on a flight soon, which I feel like I always take a hit no matter what, whenever I take a flight. And I have the theory that it's because we're so elevated, like we're disconnected. I know grounding helps afterwards. If you're just like in a different time zone, it'll kind of help recalibrate you a little bit. But is there any type of material that would literally make us grounded 24/7, even if we're up in like the 20th floor of a skyrise building? Carry the earth with you.
Yeah, a plane would be a different story than a high-rise building. You can definitely be grounded in a high-rise building, but a plane, not to my knowledge. I don't know how you would accomplish that. It's just not possible unless you kind of have that direct connection to the Earth's surface.
So like carrying dirt around my shoes will not help me. I'll just have
surprisingly, it will not. It will not help you, but I mean, might make you feel good feet being on some dirt instead of something.
Yeah, true.
Headaches.
So you said indirectly before too, and this has kind of been a question that I've been asked frequently with some of my clients that are getting into grounding mats or grounding sheets. I personally liked the grounding mat. I don't know what material it is. It's like a leatherish type material. You could help me out with that one.
Carbon,
as opposed to the sheet. I felt like it was better for me, but I know a lot of people would not want to sleep directly on that, or even like a grounding sheet that's got the silver intertwined with it. Maybe they don't like the way that it looks, so they want to put their sheet over it. Do you need that direct contact, or even if you're like elevated above it, would you still get the benefit of a mat or a sheet if you have sheets over it?
I mean, if you're very close to a conductive source, it will ground you. So is this more of like an aesthetic concern, or is it like a health concern? Like they don't want to put their body on this because they think it might hurt them. Is it more of an aesthetic thing?
I would say aesthetic, However, since you mentioned that, some people that I've introduced this to, like my father, when he initially got on it, he started getting cramps in his calves. They kind of dissipated a little bit and it got better. His range of motion actually got better. That's how I knew that it was doing something. And the first day that I started to sleep on them myself, I laid on the mat for probably like 30 minutes and I started to get really, really congested, like stuffy nose. I got off, it went away. Got back on, congested again. And what I thought of this was, okay, I'm getting blood flow to these areas that may not have received circulation in who knows how long. And now my body's actually able to heal or deal with whatever blockage, whatever issue is there, dormant, that I didn't know about. So from an aesthetic standpoint, would you be grounded still if you put sheets over a mat or a grounding sheet?
I would say it depends on what you're putting over the mat or the sheet. If you're using like a very natural fabric, you will probably be okay. Again, the number one way to be sure is to actually like use a multimeter. So if it's a natural fiber, there's a good chance. Don't know for sure unless you test. But definitely with the more synthetic fibers like the polyester and nylon, whatever else blankets are made with, it's going to make those are a bit more insulating. And so it'd be a bit more tough if you were to lay that over your grounding mat or your grounding sheet. And that will, I think, definitely hinder the process. Yeah, I mean, to me, they were pretty comfy to lay on the grounding sheets and all that. So actually what I do is I don't even use the sheet. So how I sleep is I sleep with my hand underneath my pillow. And so I lay the mat kind of underneath my pillow and I'm just kind of like in direct contact with my mat the whole time. So.
Got you. And you don't like twist around and become ungrounded at some points?
I don't move too much while I'm sleeping. No, I'm usually pretty
a baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
But maybe it would be good. You did mention there's an aesthetic side of that, and there's also a health side of that. Because kind of going back to what you said earlier, it's a very subjective experience what people go through when they start using grounding products or they just start grounding in general outside. Some people react differently. So like take sleep, for example. Some people get much more vivid dreams. Some people get much more deep sleep where they don't dream at all. And some people can't sleep at all. How I describe grounding to people is that what grounding is going to do for your body is it's essentially going to bring you back to a state of normalcy. And so like somebody that's kind of in this, hypo-energetic state and somebody that's in this hyper energetic state, it's going to kind of bring them more towards the middle there. And so like the people that are, very hypo energetic, it's going to bring them more towards that middle to where they might feel like they have a bit more energy, which as you can see might hinder sleep a little bit. So it's very subjective on the person that's grounding. And there are so many different factors that play into that. Going back to your congestion thing and when you're using your mat, like to me, that's your body healing. That's your body maybe perhaps going through a detoxification process and getting rid of toxins in your body and what have you. So again, it's a very subjective experience, but what grounding is going to do for you is really dependent on where you're at as far as your physiology goes. With healthier people, it's not going to affect them as much. With unhealthy people, it's going to affect them quite a bit more and not always in the same ways.
With that in mind, would you say that there almost needs to be like microdosing for some people? So if you're extremely unhealthy, could grounding and having all this new circulation, this new blood flow, which I would like you to explain a little bit, like what happens there, could it potentially be bad for them? Too much too soon?
Yeah, I wouldn't say bad. I would say maybe uncomfortable. But if you are maybe that 0.01% that's having adverse effects from introducing grounding in your life, sure. And start off little and just kind of increase it as time goes on. But most people aren't going to be experiencing that kind of thing. Most people are going to be feeling a lot better. Body's going to be feeling a lot better. Sleep's going to be feeling a lot better. So if you're the 0.01% of people out there that have that kind of weird reaction to grounding, then you can for sure take it slow. And most people do that anyway, because like, surprisingly to a lot of people, grounding takes up too much time in a day, and it's too hard to go do this during the day. So, but yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that.
Hi.
Okay.
What's his name?
Jax.
Jax. Nice to meet you, Jax.
Say hi. Say hi, Earthpapi. We're not done.
He's shy.
1 second. Yeah. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Go ahead. Sorry about that. I knew he would make a little visit.
They're all good.
It's funny that you mentioned that. Yeah, people, it's hard for them to do this. Meanwhile, this is something that we literally would have been connected in the past, like 24/7. When I started thinking about like sleeping grounded, the mattress is literally like elevated off the ground. Like, not only is there concrete, there's tile, there's wood floor, whatever, synthetic flooring, carpet. You're literally elevated off the ground.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, this was natural to be immersed in nature 24/7. So what is your current protocol? How many hours do you spend grounded, and like, do you seek it if, for instance, you know that you're going to be in a bunch of meetings, if you're in school, you're going to be in class, like, do you miss being outside?
I mean, right now I'm grounded up to 18 hours a day, and that includes like sleep when I'm working in my garage on a concrete floor, when I'm working at my computer desk with my grounding mat, when I'm studying on my grounding mat. So, I practice the 80-20. You know, I try and spend most of my day grounded, and the other parts that I just don't really worry about it. As long as I'm getting most of my day grounded, I think I'm in the clear, and I'm getting a lot of the cool benefits of grounding. But I don't have anything like crazy in my life where I'm gonna not be grounded for like the next 5 or 6 hours, unless I'm taking a trip, like on a plane or something like that. But yeah, I don't really run into that issue too much. I get a decent amount of grounding every day. So
What do you do during the winter?
most of my grounding mat. I also do get outside. I think it's good to mix the cold exposure with the grounding. Obviously, use common sense about it. If it's 0 degrees out, try and be smart about it. But what I do usually is when I ground, I'll go pour like some boiling hot water like on the concrete out in front of my door, and I'll just stand there for a bit on that concrete. Makes it more conductive, and that's how I'll do it. So that would be a nice little hack for people that are in places like I am in Iowa, where it gets very, very cold, very snowy, very icy. So yeah, you could do that. Have a little broom there, brush away the snow. So it's doable if you really want to utilize this practice for your health. People will make time and they'll put in the effort to do it.
So I'm here in sunny Florida. We don't have seasons. We don't deal with the cold. Even in the winter, if we get like a cold front, it's like 60s, and you see everyone in their Ugg boots and stuff. How much do you think something like seasonal, what's it called? I don't even know, because I'm from Florida. Seasonal depression.
Yeah.
How much of that would you say could be attributed to literally not getting grounded?
Yeah.
I know a lot has to do with light.
Yeah, definitely the light exposure, the UV exposure, the different types of UV, UVBA, UVB. On top of the grounding, like there's so many things that are going to be contributing to your body's lack of energy. Those are two of your biggest energy sources, are sunlight and being directly in contact with the earth. And in the winter, especially here, if you're not getting those things, you don't have a grounding mat or anything, you're not getting as much sunlight, you're not getting as much time outside. I think that'll make people absolutely miserable. And I 100% believe that contributes to seasonal depression for sure. Among other things, people don't really eat correctly in the winter, especially around here. They're not eating seasonal, they're not eating what's local. And that plays a huge part in dysregulating their circadian rhythms. Like there's so much that goes into that seasonal depression, but not getting adequate natural light and getting their grounding time is a big part of that as well.
So eating seasonally, do you switch over to more like animal based? You're loading up on the fats and such, and you drop the
Yeah.
carbohydrate load?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to eat what's local around here. You know, potatoes, some vegetables, mostly meat and fat. And then, you know, when summer comes along, I'll allow myself some more fruit, some more sugar. But really, I mean, people shouldn't really be eating what's not local to them, especially when you're around here. Like in the winter, you have access to berries and like fruit and bananas and pineapples like year round. Like, what are you doing? Like, what you're telling your body, you're giving your body these mixed signals, and that's why you experience a lot of these gut related issues, these health related issues when you're eating those kinds of things. So, and your ancestry plays a big part of that as well. So, like, I'm Native American, and so mostly what my ancestors ate was meat and fat, and so I try and stay pretty. I try to adhere to that as much as I can. So.
Yeah, that makes the most sense to me too. Have you ever looked into the work of Dr. Jack Cruz?
Yeah. Yep.
Because he mentions that a lot too.
Yep.
Like eating a pineapple in
I have one
Boston.
of his books, the Epi Paleo RX. I read one of those
RX,
books.
yeah. I haven't read that myself, but I've dove into a lot of his work.
Some of it gets a
So
bit esoteric, and I'm kind of, I like it, and I also don't like it because it starts to get into like quantum physics a little bit, which is its own kind of area. And so, you know, applying that to biology is a very tricky area. But I do like what he has to say a lot about, you know, diet and leptin resistance and all that. And he does mention grounding a lot and getting natural light.
yeah. So you mentioned earlier too how grounding, earthing is going to be like an individual thing. Everyone's going to experience a little bit something different. And I'm not afraid or ashamed to make bold statements. I rather just lay it out there because I believe that anecdotal evidence is the new science, honestly, because a lot of science can be kind of bought. There's good science, there's bad science, there's bought science. My mom, she was able to come off of blood pressure medication with grounding as soon as we introduced it. And then I had another woman that we kind of work with. She came off it as well. I didn't really know at the time what was happening, but they were mentioning how if they slept grounded, their blood pressure would be too low with the medication. So they had to wean off slowly. They did it by themselves. Mm-hmm. So what is happening with the blood when people ground, and why would it have this type of effect with their blood pressure?
Yeah. So the positive, I mean, potentially negative if you're medicated, implications of grounding for the circulatory system are pretty significant. And there are studies that are published that look at people with high blood pressure, and all of their blood pressures drop. Particularly in one study in the book that I cite in there and I talk about, a lot of these people have very high blood pressure, and it drops to it's still kind of high in there, but like it's better than it was. So this blood pressure change again. Well, before I get to kind of more of the circulatory benefits, if because of that blood pressure change, obviously, if you're on a blood pressure medication like warfarin, Coumadin, or any other kind of blood thinner, you should obviously moderate that a bit. Talk to your primary care provider and tell them. And it might be a cool way to introduce them to grounding too, because there is research out there that shows that grounding affects blood pressure. It's going to have a blood thinning effect. And so if you have a good doctor, they're going to look at that and be like, okay, we need to reduce your medication dose a little bit in order to compensate for this new practice that you're involving in your life. But a lot of I think the big reason that all these blood pressure changes are happening is because the blood viscosity is changing. And what is viscosity? Viscosity is essentially a fluid's resistance to flow. So something with high viscosity would be like honey, and something with a low viscosity would be like water. And so like you can kind of visualize in your head, if you have a hose trying to squeeze honey through that hose, it's going to be much harder to squeeze that honey through the hose as opposed to the water. The water is going to run a bit more smooth. And so when you have high viscosity blood, and you're trying to squeeze it through that hose, and let's say a blood vessel, for example, trying to squeeze that blood, that thick blood through that blood vessel, you're going to create a lot of mechanical damage to the endothelial wall. On top of that, the blood pressure is going to increase. And so you're going to end up with, if you have high viscosity blood, high blood pressure, and a lot of endothelial damage. And endothelial damage is one of the biggest contributors to a lot of chronic non-communicable disease, especially in cardiovascular disease and diabetes. But the reason that this viscosity reduction is happening essentially has to do with the red blood cells. So your red blood cells or your erythrocytes, they have essentially this cloud of negative charge around them, and that's due to these sialic acid residues around the membrane. And so this charge can deteriorate, particularly when you have a lot of oxidative stress in the body and when you have a lot of sugar in your blood. And that's called glycation. It can actually mess with the charge of those red blood cells. And so what's happening when you ground, when you're establishing direct electrical contact with the surface of the earth, is electrons are infiltrating your body. It's increasing the density of negative charge in your body, and that's going to your red blood cells as well. And so that's why a few of the studies, and I have a friend that does this as well. Her name is Jessica. Jessica, if you have Twitter and Instagram, it's Jessica Genetics. She has a lot of her own studies that she's done by herself. But essentially what she sees in her studies, and then the studies that I've noted in the book, is that because that negative charge around those red blood cells is improving and increasing, in one of the studies by a factor of about 3x, improving that much. So negative repels negative. And so when you have these negative charges improving around these red blood cells are going to repel each other. And so that prevents any kind of excessive coagulation, clumping, because when you have excessive coagulation and clumping, that's what leads to this increase in viscosity. And so when you have that increase in viscosity, the downstream effects, higher blood pressure, and higher blood pressure is going to lead to a lot of other negative things as far as not just, cardiovascular, many different systems are going to be affected when you have high blood pressure.
So it seems pretty much it would be impossible to be in optimal health if you are not grounded. The less that you're grounded, the unhealthier that you're going to be.
Yes. The less you are grounded, the less natural light you're getting, your body's just going to deteriorate. You can only go so long in your life without your health deteriorating if you're not taking care of those things. I firmly believe that.
It amazes me that people can even live to their 80s, 90s, or maybe even their hundreds, eating what we eat and living the way that we do. Mm-hmm. How long do you think our lifespan truly is? This is like an off the wall question. Do you think we can live a very long time?
Well, I don't think lifespan has really changed that much. Obviously we're living longer, but we're keeping people alive longer. But if we weren't keeping people alive longer, I think the health span is just the same. I don't think we've done anything to really move the needle as far as health span. People are living longer, sure, but that's because we're keeping them alive with all of our new technology and everything, but they're not necessarily healthy when they're staying alive longer. So I really don't know. I don't know. I know there are people that live quite a bit longer, up to their, I think like 120 is like around that area is like the person that's lived the longest. And again, it's really weird that these people live so long, and they're not grounded and they eat like shitty food. And I also have this other theory that, these people, while they may not be doing these things that we're talking about, grounding or getting natural light or eating locally and exercising, what they do have that a lot of people don't really think about is they have more purpose in their life. They have more meaningful relationships. They're happier. And I think people really underestimate just being happy and establishing those meaningful relationships and having purpose in your life, and how far that will take you as far as longevity goes, even when you're not doing all of these things for your health, grounding, getting natural light, getting good food in your body, just living a purposeful, meaningful, happy life that tells your body that it's healthy in a way. So that's kind of why I think these people live so long, even if they're not living, the most healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, I could see that because your thoughts in and of themselves are going to have like a hormonal impact on your physiology. They're going to alter just how you express yourself.
That would be your case in point mind-body connection right there.
So we talked about blood flow, the viscosity, hypertension. What other benefits would there be to grounding? What's you mentioned heart rate variability a lot. What's that? Can we dive into HRV?
Yeah, and HRV is a good segue into like the brain and things like that. But I don't want to be redundant because I know you had Clint on, and I don't know what he discussed exactly with you. So if we ever get into something like that, just like let me know, and I'll let people listen to that episode. But really, I mean, we'll get into these benefits, but when I tell people about these benefits, I first like to start them off with kind of these three core mechanisms, and I call them the big three in the book. These three things that are happening in your body are the reason all of these different benefits are stemming. It's why they stem out from these things. So if we kind of focus in on the little benefits, we kind of miss the forest for the trees. So before we talk about heart rate variability, I did want to mention the big three. And so what the big three are when you ground. So number one is that it increases the density of negative charge in your body. And that is your body's natural electrical state. That is electrical homeostasis. I would really like to make this more known among people because when they think of homeostasis, they don't think of the electrical side of that. And so electrical homeostasis is the electrical potential of your body is the same as the electrical potential of the earth. That is electrical homeostasis. And that allows your body to function as it's meant to function. That's why all of these benefits are manifested in your body. These circulatory benefits, these nervous system benefits, these immune benefits. That's all because you're in electrical homeostasis. So when people ask me if they think that grounding can help a specific condition, I'm like, yeah, your body's literally in its default state, its factory settings. And so, yeah, I do think that grounding pretty much affects everything and every kind of health ailment that you're dealing with. So that's number one. Number two is that it attenuates the excessive inflammatory oxidative stress response. And so, the number one killer worldwide is non-communicable chronic disease, cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative, all these different things. They have this thing in common where there's an excessive, chronic, persistent inflammatory response, just being sustained. And where you find one, inflammation or oxidative stress, you'll likely find the other. So where grounding comes into the picture is with oxidative stress. And so you have electrons coming into your body. Because what is oxidative stress? Oxidative stress it's an imbalance between reactive oxygen species in your body and antioxidants. And so what these reactive oxygen species are there these reactive oxygen molecules that are missing electrons, and it makes them very reactive. And so what antioxidants essentially do is they donate electrons to these reactive oxygen species. And so the most obvious kind of conclusion there is that, you have these electrons coming into your body. You have this negative charge coming into your body, and that allows your body to neutralize excessive oxidative stress. So kind of by proxy, what we're doing is we're influencing oxidative stress, excessive, and by proxy, we are influencing inflammation as well. And so when you're looking for, cures to disease and figuring out how to alleviate disease, you kind of have to look for these common denominators amongst these conditions. And these common denominators are certainly chronic low-grade inflammation and oxidative stress. So that's number two. And then number three is that it charges the water in your body, the water protein matrix battery, as I like to call it. And that's more kind of on the esoteric side of things. But that's a really cool topic as well. But yeah, those are kind of the big three core mechanisms I have listed in the book. And that's going to lead to a plethora of different positive manifestations in the body. But to go back to your question with HRV, HRV stands for heart rate variability, and that is basically the time interval in between each heartbeat. And so when that variability is high, that's a good sign. It essentially means your body is better able to cope with its environment, with stress. And if it's low, that essentially means the opposite. And so what heart rate variability, measuring heart rate variability does is it essentially gives you a view into the brain, because in your brain, you have this thing called the autonomic nervous system, and that's composed of the parasympathetic, the sympathetic nervous system. And so when you're looking at heart rate variability, particularly these high frequencies, these low frequencies, these very low frequencies, and how they analyze these things, they very much notice a difference in these high frequencies, which are indicative of more parasympathetic activity when you're grounded. So when you grounded, those high frequencies improve. So that essentially tells the experimenters that what's happening when you ground is your body is entering kind of this state of relaxation. A more balanced autonomic nervous system, which more often than not is your parasympathetic nervous system being more activated. Because most people, they live on the sympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system, not so much the parasympathetic. You do have parasympathetic people that are kind of in that hypo sympathetic state. And, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier with the subjective, if you have that person that's on kind of the hyper parasympathetic state, they're kind of like really just too relaxed. What's grounding going to do there? It's going to make them more sympathetic. So again, it's a very subjective thing, but what they did notice in this heart rate variability is that their high frequencies, their autonomic nervous system is becoming more balanced and favoring more towards the parasympathetic side.
Yeah, that's something that I used to really put out there. Granted, you are a brain, brother. Like, I don't mean to kiss your ass here, but honestly, like, you're very, very clear and concise with all your messages, even with your book here too. But from my knowledge, from my understanding, as soon as you touch your feet to the earth, as soon as you're grounded, you get into a parasympathetic state, which would be your rest and digest. That's how you actually heal. Right. And since you were mentioning like the antioxidants, obviously people think of like antioxidants being berries or things like vitamin C. Mm-hmm. Had Dr. Levy on here before. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work, but he talks about like vitamin C therapies. And to me, what that's doing, he actually considered that like antioxidants would be the energy source of the body. And this is how he was able to like cure things like cancer with high dose vitamin C treatments. But to me, it'd be simpler if you literally just grounded, because there's free antioxidants, there's free electrons for you to combat all those free radicals, all the reactive oxygen species, the inflammation right there.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's much easier. So, and I talk about this in the book as well. It comes down to conductive antioxidants versus chemical antioxidants. So, and this has to do more with the immune system as well. So, like, there's this kind of misconception that, the more antioxidants you eat, the less oxidative stress you're going to experience. But really, your body makes its own antioxidants, its own endogenous antioxidants, which have kind of their drawbacks as opposed to conductive antioxidants as well. But really, in this whole consuming antioxidants from foods and supplements, you run into this idea in the literature. It's called the antioxidant paradox, which is basically the low efficacy of supplemented antioxidants, whether that's through food or whether it's through actually supplementing the antioxidants itself, to where it doesn't like in a vial, it works fine, but once they're in the body, once these antioxidants get in the body, they're kind of powerless in a sense. And that's because, there's so many different pathways that these antioxidants are involved with, that to fine tune these antioxidants to go where they need to without, destroying too many reactive oxygen species, because you need a good balance between reactive oxygen species and antioxidants. You don't have to deal with these things when you're dealing with conducted antioxidants, because when you're dealing with chemical antioxidants, you have to consume them. They have to go through the digestion system. They have to get to where they need to be. And that has its own drawbacks, but you don't have to deal with that with conducted antioxidants, which are electrons, because your body has essentially this semiconductive infrastructure that allows these conducted antioxidants, these free electrons, to essentially find where they need to go very efficiently, very quickly. And that's why I think grounding is the ultimate antioxidant, because it essentially uses this highway that your body is built of, the semiconductive highway of protein and water that allows them to get to where they need to be. It's essentially like having the battery that exists in your body charged up, these reservoirs in your body with electrons, having them charged up. And that's a state of high inflammatory preparedness, as opposed to someone who doesn't ground a lot. They don't have these free electrons available in their body. They're in a state of low inflammatory preparedness. But I really think grounding, getting these electrons directly from the earth, is going to be your best way to combat oxidative stress. Chemical antioxidants definitely do have their drawbacks, and sometimes even there are negative implications associated with that, because when you're consuming these things and you're just reducing oxidative stress just to reduce oxidative stress, oxidative stress is a very natural process in the body, especially when it comes to the immune system. Your body uses these reactive species to basically combat pathogens. So if your immune system isn't functioning optimally, there's going to be some negative drawbacks to that. And a lot of the studies that are published on antioxidants, they're like, this thing might even lead to cancer, like, supplementing with too many antioxidants and really affecting that balance. So something to think about.
How far do you think grounding can go? And I know that's a super broad question, but you're mentioning the immune response, the immune system. I was just looking back at the C19. I'm not going to actually mention the word because some of my videos have been pulled from YouTube for mentioning that type of stuff. But how far do you think earthing, grounding, assuming that you're doing everything else right, you're getting the sunlight, you're getting the proper nutrition, do you think that there's stuff that we cannot heal from? Or can we heal everything?
I suppose it just depends on the severity of whatever you're dealing with. If you're in stage 4 cancer or something like that, I don't think, getting natural light and grounding every day is going to, stop that from happening. I think it's going to alleviate some of those symptoms, maybe lengthen out your life a little bit more. But there are some things where it's just like, God's calling you home. Like, and you can only control so much. And, the thing with grounding is that I don't think it's the key to healing people and to curing disease. I think it's one of the keys, and it's an underlooked key, and it's a key more people need to look into. But, if you're dealing with something very, very serious, sometimes, that's God calling you back, and we can only do so much about that. But what we can do is we can help alleviate some of those symptoms and maybe help you live out a more painless kind of rest of your days situation. So, and that's kind of a Debbie Downer or answer for that. But that's what I think about it. So,
I like your honesty. So I know that you just had a health scare. I've been monitoring your stories. I don't mean to seem like a stalker or anything like that, but I know that you were like in some type of garden. You were quoting scripture as well. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like implementing a grounding practice has brought you closer to God?
Absolutely. I had and I haven't really told people what happened with me is I had a tooth infection. I had a tooth infection that spread to my heart. And so, I was in the hospital and kind of essentially that was my near-death experience. And I basically thought I was going to die for like 3 months. And so I spent a lot of my time in one of the local church gardens. I spent a lot of time grounded, more grounding than I've ever done in my life. I spent a lot of time reading. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what's happened to me. And I genuinely believe all of taking my grounding kind of into overdrive a little bit, that really helped me heal from the things that I was dealing with. Yeah, it was, and that just goes to show, I do a lot of things right. I get all my grounding in. I try and expose myself to like natural light and all that. But there's only so much you can do, especially when you're dealing with like really acute situations, infections, and things like that. It's difficult to control these things, and you can only do what you can as far as the natural modalities like the grounding. So.
You mentioned the water before too, and that was a huge thing. I was actually, as I was reading that last few chapters in volume 2, and you were going to like the esoteric realm of things. I've had a previous guest on as well that mentions how like water is alive. Mm-hmm. I think I sent it in the email too, how I'm curious, like you mentioned grounding can help with structured water, building easy water. Light is also involved with it too, like infrared will help build structured easy water. Mm-hmm. So what is easy water? How does grounding help with it? And why is it important for us? How does that help out with the matrix, as you mentioned it?
For sure. And the easy water is kind of, it's not really anything without the matrix. The matrix includes water. So really quickly, how I define the matrix in the body is it's essentially this direct connection of structures from the interior of cells to the nucleus to the extracellular matrix, and all the proteins that matrix is composed of. And it's the hydration layer, the water layer that's adjacent to it. And the water that's adjacent to this matrix becomes very, very special. And that's the easy water they talk about, or coherent water. And so what that is exactly is this water comes into contact with the matrix, with these proteins. And essentially what's going to happen is it's going to create a separation of charges. And so the very astute people out there know that when you have a separation of charges, what do you have? You have a battery. And so you have this negative charge going one way and you have this positive charge going the other way. So you have electricity and what some would deem proticity. And so this electricity, this proticity can be used for a lot of different things. Energy production, immune function, one of the organelles that's literally anchored physically to the matrix is the mitochondria. And a lot of people know that's a big energy transducer, creates our ATP, creates energy for our body. I don't think it's the main source of energy for our body, and that's a whole nother story. But it is one of the ways that this battery can be utilized. Another way on the electricity, the electron side of this thing, is for immune function, and penetrating inflammatory barricades that exist in your body. And the electrons also contribute to the electron transport chain in mitochondria. So there's a lot of different ways that this matrix, your body can utilize this matrix. But to go back to the water thing, what happens is that the water comes into contact with these surfaces, these proteins, these hydrophilic surfaces, and it structures itself, it orders itself in such a way that there is a separation of charge. And so in order to maintain that charge, there's what exists in this battery? Well, it's that negative charge. And so what are some of what we've been talking about this whole podcast? You have this negative charge coming into your body through grounding, and that's contributing to this coherent water or this easy water and allowing this battery to be sustained. And another really, really good way is through getting natural light, particularly near infrared radiation in the infrared wavelength. That's a really good way at building this coherent water. But this is your body's battery. It can be used for many different things, and I have a whole chapter dedicated to it, and parts and volume 2 of the book talks a lot about it too. So it's definitely more so on the esoteric side of things, but there is a lot of science involved with it, and I had to dig into a lot of work by Maewon Ho and Gerald Pollack, and amongst many other biophysicists. You know, a lot of people, you know, they think, you know, Gerald Pollack is the one that discovered like easy water and all this thing, but people were noticing this very, very unique phenomena of water in the body like a long time before Gerald Pollack. I would say as far back as Albert Szent-Györgyi, and he was like in the 40s, I think, in that time frame, and he was already mentioning things with this water, this special type of water in the body.
So would there be necessarily bad or like non-optimal water that we can drink, or does that not make too much of a difference if you're getting the negative charge for your body from the earth? Like what I was thinking is, before we would consume water that was like in a stream, it runs over these rocks, it forms vortexes and such, it's exposed to sunlight. But now we literally have refrigerated, bottled water, almost as if it's in like a prison. So again, as if water was alive, now you're imprisoning it and we're selling it. We're capitalizing off of what should be free. So in that sense, would like Dasani water, would that deplete the easy water in your body, or does it kind of not really matter?
I think any kind of water is going to, as long as it's hydrating water, it's full of minerals and it's full of ions, it's going to work. There are going to be some drawbacks with that. It's not what you would call living water. It doesn't go through like these naturally like vortexing processes like you mentioned. And there, you know, most people are drinking water out of very toxic materials that have metals in them and plastics in them. So obviously your best choice is going to be getting it from natural bodies of water, from springs and getting it from fruits and foods, because fruits and foods have their own water content. And that's a very good way to hydrate yourself. And not a lot of people think about that, the water content of the foods and the fruits that you're consuming. But as far as, if it's not going to work, getting water from like your tap, which, I hope people have, water filters and stuff like that. It's not, I don't think it's going to be as good for you as getting it from springs, but people can only do so much. So, I think the main thing you want to worry about is getting the right light on your body and getting grounding done, because that's really what's going to influence the water that's already in your body. The water that your body already creates, the water that your mitochondria already makes. That's going to be the big needle mover as far as influencing the water.
So the mitochondria, you're saying it already makes water.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like, since you've been grounding more, that you need to drink less water? And something that I thought about too long time ago.
I notice when I am more grounded, I feel less desire to eat and less desire to drink as much. And that's essentially because because what are you doing with food, and what are you doing with things that you're consuming? You're stripping electrons from it. You're oxidizing it so you can use it to create energy. If I'm already outside and I'm getting electrons from the earth, I'm essentially doing what I'm doing to food. I'm getting electrons from the earth, the same electrons that I would get from food, to power my metabolism. And so, I mean, it's probably not going to be the same for everybody. That's just how I see it in my head. And I think that's the reason where I don't feel the need to eat as much or consume as much when I'm getting more grounding time in.
Mm-hmm. So how much would you say that you eat? You don't calorie count or anything like that, I would imagine?
Yeah, I don't calorie count or anything like that. So I can tell you what I consume on a daily basis, though. So like in the morning, I'll have about 5 scrambled eggs mixed with some diced potatoes and some onions, with some orange juice in the summer, a glass of milk, some tea, and some black coffee. And then I don't really have lunch. I kind of just wait till dinner time around 6 or 7, where then I have a protein smoothie and a bowl of ground beef mixed with green bell peppers and onions. So that's pretty much what I eat every day.
Your mush.
Yeah, my mush. Mush has evolved as of late. I've been experimenting with baptized mush, aka soup, and yeah, right now I'm doing kind of smaller potato content and more so the meat and onions because the potatoes make me like super sleepy, which is fine if I'm eating it close to bed, but the potatoes really kind of knock me out.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Less food required. I feel that too, honestly, that I don't really need to eat as much as I went through exercise science in college. They teach you that you need 1 gram protein per pound of lean muscle or lean body weight and such, but I definitely don't hit anywhere near that. And then I still am able to make gains. Like my legs blow up if I even touch a weight or if I even look at weight. And I can tell you I'm not getting anywhere near 170 grams of protein per day. I just can't. Like my body, especially if you're eating real food, your body will tell you when to stop.
Yeah. Just eat till you're satiated. Like you did. That's how I try and do things. Eat satiating foods and eat till you're satiated. And anabolic it's kind of a mindset too. So I have a shirt that says that.
I was just looking at your shop too. I'm definitely gonna buy the insulation is gay shirt. I will be buying that this weekend.
Yeah, that's been a very popular one.
Yeah.
I'm surprised I haven't gotten my website like flagged or anything. So it's so far so good.
Nice. Can we hydrate through our feet? That's a question that I'd like. So I know that people mention, or you even mentioned it too. It's like the best type of grounding is going to be like wet surfaces. So is there a way to like pull water through your feet? Because we have pores on the bottom of our feet.
I don't believe so. I don't think that would actually be like a physiological process to absorb the water from your feet and have that go into your digestive system and where it gets to your cells. And yeah, I don't think, not in my mind, no.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Yeah. Just a thought that I've previously had. So one thing is, in one of the early chapters in your book, you bring up a study about vagal tone and babies. There was a study in the neonatal or the NICU, I believe it was, and they grounded some babies and they noticed like immediately afterwards that I'm going to butcher it, but whatever benefit that they got, it went away immediately. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So is there, as soon as we lose contact with the earth, as soon as we're ungrounded, is there a way to go like past below the baseline that we previously had? Do we get worse?
So yeah, in the study that you mentioned with preemies that are dealing with like that are more predisposed to like necrotizing enterocolitis and stuff like that. How they looked at the vagal tone improvement in these preemie babies is they measured one of the things that we talked about earlier, which was HRV, and they noticed that the HRV is improving in these babies that are grounded. Particularly by looking at their high frequencies, and they found an inverse relationship between the induced body voltage on their body and their vagal tone. So as the induced body voltage on their body goes down, vagal tone goes up. So that was a nice relationship that they found. But yeah, one of the things that they notice is that this HRV kind of returns back to how it was when they're removed from that connection, when they're insulated. So I still think you're getting benefits while you're grounded, but some of these parameters are going to return to their levels when you're insulated, when you go back to being insulated. But I do think some of them, if you do it this was like a few day experiment. If you're doing this long term and you're implementing it in your daily life, I think these baselines definitely change. And so if that was a long-term study, I think it would be a little bit a different story. But yeah, it's an instant, especially like when you're dealing with something like induced body voltage, because as soon as you step off the conductive surface or whatever they were using to ground them, I don't know if it was the mats or patches or something like that. When you're dealing with something like that, and especially and it deals with the nervous system too, the autonomic nervous system, the vagal nerve, HRV, these are very much electrical processes. And so these are going to be some of the first things that revert back to how they were when you become insulated. So lesson in there, more grounding the better, and try and stay grounding. Try and stay grounded for as long as you can.
I mean, if they haven't gotten that by this long into the podcast, I don't know if there's any hope.
Yeah. I do my best. I do my best to try and make this accessible for people and fun, because I've done a lot of podcasts about this so far, and I think I've hit the sweet spot as far as, trying to convince people that this is really important and you need to be doing this, and it's literally, one of nature's metrics for you to be in kind of this natural electrical state with the human body, and just kind of describing the physics behind it. And I think a lot more people are open to grounding once you kind of describe to them the underlying physics and what grounding is, at least from electrical standpoint, and why places are grounded to the earth. And yeah, hopefully by this point in the podcast, people are like, oh, this is actually really important, I should be doing this more.
Yeah. This is your purpose. I mean, You've really committed to this. You have the tattoo on your neck, I see. What is that?
Yeah, well, I have the same one on the back of my neck, but that's the electrical grounding symbol. So in any electrical schematic you look at, basically the blueprint of a circuit, that symbol represents electrical ground. It essentially means that the system is electrically grounded to the earth, or where to input the electrical ground. And then I also have a rose there, which is for my mom, and then a serpent there for my dad, which represents the story in the Bible with Moses, and Moses is my dad. So
you mentioned body voltage. So this makes me think of EMFs, and this also makes me think of the airplane too. So if we're in this freaking EMF tunnel, are we just accruing more and more voltage until we can finally dissipate it?
Yeah, for sure. And it's particularly important the higher up you go in the Earth's atmosphere. So the Earth's electrical field it's going to increase about 150 volts per meter. So you can imagine being that high up, the Earth's electrical field and its power on your body. And the reason, so if you're outside right now and you're standing directly on the earth and you're wearing shoes, that would be, and you're probably around 6 foot, that would be a 300 volt difference between the top of your head and the bottom of your feet. And so a lot of people, they would think, well, why don't you get shocked by that? And that's because, the air is a pretty good insulator, and that prevents that from happening. So yeah, but the higher up you go, especially if you're in a plane or something and you're exposed to the Earth's electrical field being that high, and you're in this metal tube, you're essentially this positive charge that's building up on top of your body is going to be pretty significant. And you did mention EMFs too, very non-native EMFs. These definitely induce a charge on your body. The things that we expose ourselves to every day, communication devices, wireless communication devices, our wiring in our homes, all the different appliances that we use, they operate on 50 to 60 hertz, alternating currents, radio frequencies, microwaves. These all, when they come into contact with your body, this ambient, unnatural electromagnetic radiation, it will induce a charge on your body that is measurable. And so if I'm not on my mat right now, I have my multimeter next to me. Here, I'll show you. So I have my multimeter right here, and what it's going to do, I'm not on my mat right now. It's going to measure the body voltage on my body. So my body voltage right now, not on my mat, is 4 volts. And that's because I'm around a lot of electronics. I'm around, there's a Wi-Fi router, literally 8 feet from me. A lot of things that are running off electricity. So when I put this mat back underneath me, what it drops down to is roughly zero volts. So that 4 volts is that positive buildup of charge that happens when you're exposed to these non-native electromagnetic fields that are created by our electronics and our wireless communication devices.
What's the highest you've seen that it can get up to? We have everybody.
It depends on a couple factors. For me, I'm usually only measuring myself. And so I've been in the same place for quite a few years now. So if I'm not on this, it's usually like 4 or 5 volts. But the two things that are going to play into that is the strength of the frequencies that are around you, the radio frequencies, and how close you are to the wiring. It's what happens. It's a process called capacitive coupling. So like, the wiring in this wall here is one of the capacitors, and my body is the capacitor. So that capacitor is giving off this radiation, and when it hits my body, it induces a voltage on my body as well. That's what capacitive coupling is. And so obviously that means that, and it's a process called the inverse square law. And so basically, if I can double the distance between me and the wiring in my building, I can essentially quadruple the reduction in force that wire is going to have on my body. But all these things that we use, they induce a positive charge on your body. So, going back to your question, what it depends on is how close you are, the proximity of you to these sources that are producing this kind of radiation, and how high you are up in as far as like relative to the Earth's surface. So if you're much higher up, you're going to have a greater induced body voltage on you, a greater built up positive charge. And that doesn't necessarily have to do with the electronics or anything. It's just you being in the Earth's electric field and going higher up. And that's probably one of the reasons that a lot of issues happen in more high rise buildings as far as like cardiac events and everything. So,
yeah,
it
would be solved if they got grounded.
Yeah, for sure. And I've talked about it in the book. What would be really cool is grounding beds. That would be a super, super easy way to help a lot of people that are hospitalized, use these grounding mats and utilize these grounding sheets more. I think it'd help a lot of people.
Yeah. My fiance last August, she actually had to go to the ER because her appendix burst. Meanwhile, she's a freaking trooper, bro. We were grounding, we were doing all the things and stuff like that, and she was able to fight it off for like a week before I could drag her in there. But the whole time she didn't have like a grounding sheet. Obviously not the best foods and such, but, and I'm glad you touched on that because that was going to be my next question. Have you seen any hospitals implementing this? Like where do you think the delay is? Because as social media is here, there has to be physicians that are hearing about this type of stuff. Why do you think there's no implementation, or do you think it's just on the horizon?
Well, to answer the initial part, I haven't seen any hospitals that implement this. I have seen some places that implement more of the natural lighting. But as far as grounding goes, I haven't seen anybody really implement it, much to my dismay. Grounding is it's one of those things that the whole book is based off pretty much of like the main studies that have to do with grounding, between like 25 and 30 studies. And so people on the outside, they don't really look into it. They're like, oh, this doesn't have a ton of research on it. So I'm not really going to pay it too much attention. And that's what a lot of doctors do. So that's sad. But in a way I can see where they're coming from, because doctors have to stay up to date on a lot of different things, and they can't stay up to date on everything. So I get it. And, I don't think doctors are out there to hurt you. I think providers most providers are genuinely good people, and they just can't keep up with everything. And I don't think the healthcare system is out to get you like most people on Instagram and Twitter think. They think it's evil and they're trying to hurt you. It's like, no, these people genuinely want to help you. It's just like these things like natural lighting and grounding are still, more people know about them now, but they're still kind of in their infancy. And so hopefully, in the next 10 to 15 years, as we start to get more acquainted with the biophysics of the body, these things will change, and people will start to realize that if we can modulate the physics of our immediate environment, that can take you a long way in your health, and especially in the healthcare environment. So I do hope that it's implemented more in practice and in clinics and in hospitals. So it's definitely something I wish to see in the next 10 to 15 years.
So would you say that you feel like that's going to be our future? In the book, you play, I guess you would say the hero, but you have this newcomer to the city that you're guiding around. Do you think that we need to separate and get pretty much all into nature where like education's out there? That would be my kind of ideal setting, especially for my son. I try to have him barefoot as much as possible. I want to get him outdoors in like a co-op and such. Do you think we need to get away from the city, or do you think we just need to mitigate as much as possible?
I think that humans are innately beings that want to create and progress and constantly make things better and bigger and more technologically advanced. And I think as far as our unnatural environment, that's only going to get worse. And so, yeah, we're in a good time right now. You can just move to the country, but 20 years down the line, when infrastructure probably changes significantly as far as like communication lines and towers and all that, there's only going to be so much that we can do. Just I tell people not to stress about it too much. Just try and get as much grounding in as you can, get as much natural light in as you can, because you can only control so much. And yeah, my pessimistic side of me is like, well, yeah, things are definitely going to get worse as far as our unnatural environment, but we can do some things at least, and that's controlling the amount of time we're spent grounded to the earth, and controlling our light environment, and controlling our diet, and living a more active lifestyle. But yeah, it's right now, obviously it'd be better to be in the country because you aren't exposed to like these cell towers and all the other things that accommodate being in an unnatural environment. But yeah.
We got two more questions for you, brother, because I want to be mindful of your time. I know we started a little bit late here. And
I got all the time in the world, man.
I could ask you questions for days. So if you're open to it, I would love to do a part 2 eventually. Maybe get into more of the esoteric stuff. Mm-hmm. So you make shoes. What inspired you to begin that? Where'd you even pick it up? And how exactly does it work?
Yeah. So when I started 5 years ago, when I was like making videos and everything, I was like, I put a lot of work into this, and it's nice to help people, but it would be cool to like figure out how to monetize it in some way. So I was like, well, you can't always be barefoot everywhere you go. Sometimes people don't want to be barefoot, and sometimes you're on terrains that don't really allow for you to be barefoot, rocky, glassy areas, just kind of dirty areas. And so I was like, well, you need something to ground you when you can't be barefoot. And so initially I started working on a shoe. And that's the shoe that I just kind of started promoting a little bit. That's the Aries. And then in the meantime, while I was working on that, the sandals came about, Gaia grounding sandals. And then now I kind of have the whole Olympus Earthwear line, which is sandals, boots, sneakers, slide-ons. But what all this footwear does is there's a metal conductor in it. There's a copper plate, copper rivet that it's installed in all the footwear, and that allows you to establish direct electrical connection with the surface of the earth, so you are grounded through the footwear. There are footwear out there that utilize a more conductive sole that don't utilize the metal. I'm not a huge fan of those just because they require much more factors to come into play as far as conductivity. It has to have the right composition of electrical conductors in the sole. The insole has to be stitched in just right with a conductive fiber, and these things deteriorate over time. So I'm not a huge fan of those kinds of shoes, but I think your best bet is using actual like direct metal in the shoe. You can't really feel it. You can't feel it in my shoes. So it's it's a way for you to be grounded when it's not always convenient to be barefoot.
Socks or no socks?
Natural socks, I think, would be better, like a cotton socks, because again, the more synthetic fibers are going to be more insulating. But yeah, you can wear socks with them. I like to not wear socks with them just because like they're leather and they feel good, like around your foot. They in a sense, they kind of stick to your foot. So they have like more of a glove fit. So I like to wear these shoes without socks. The boots are a different story. I like to wear good like cotton wool socks in the boots. But yeah, you can wear socks. The more natural fiber, the better for sure.
Gotcha. Awesome. I will look into investing in a pair of that or in a pair of your shoes. Which one would you suggest for like workouts and such? Would that be like the Aries or are you working more like casual wear?
Yeah, my Aries shoe, which is pretty close to being done and produced. I've been test driving it pretty much over the last month. Those are probably going to be your best workout shoes. Kind of like, have you had Nobles? Have you had those in the past?
Not. I've literally been rocking Vivos.
Yeah, it's like a casual shoe slash you can work out in it too. Kind of it's an everyday wear shoe as well, so it's very versatile. So I would go off of those shoes for more just gym and kind of an everyday. And then I would say like the slip-ons. You're in Florida, so it's nice to just have a slip-on shoe, especially when it's hot. You don't want to put socks on or anything, or the sandals and stuff. But Aries is probably going to be the best for gym. So, and I've had some people that have commented, well, you're going to feel it like the copper on the bottom when you lift. It's like, no, I do very, very heavy like Olympic weightlifting in these shoes, and I don't feel it at all. So they're very, very good for the weightlifting setting. So.
And they're all wide toe box.
Yeah, they're all wide. So the gym shoe is still wide toe. It's a little bit narrower, but it's still considered wide toe.
Awesome. So I wanted to know, did you ever kill the monster in the end? Last page, you left us on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's for volume 3 of the book that I'm going to be working on, and I've been basically researching and studying for, and trying to figure out how I'm going to organize that. But that's the cool thing with that story, man, is I can take it so many different directions, and it really made the whole thing really fun for me. But I would say you'll definitely find out in the next volume that I put out of this. I don't want to kill the Cthulhu character yet, because it makes for a fun story. It's kind of one of those things where you have like your nemesis, and it just keeps going on and it keeps going on. But I mean, volume 3 will probably be my last one in the series, so I'll have to figure out something as far as how to end that little feud. So. I also haven't figured out if Earthpapi is good or not, so still deciding on that.
Oh, damn. I didn't think about that. Yeah. No, I really suggest picking up Earth and Water. I'll show it again for anyone that's watching this on YouTube. I have the earthing book. I have Clint's stuff, but this, I feel like, dives into a lot more of... You make it simple, especially with the pictures, man. I was daunted as soon as I picked it up, just because I'm like, oh my God, this is huge, man. But especially with my kid now I can look at pictures, I can read. You put little captions on each of the images. It's a solid read.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I spent a lot of time figuring out how to organize that thing and how to make it. And the pictures are a nice break, especially when you're reading like dense material, like scientific material, and you're looking at citations and stuff. Like the pictures are a nice break, and it's all relevant to kind of that story, that fictional story that's taking place throughout the book. And you're immersed in this different world that I've tried to create and make very fun for people. And it's a very unique experience. And I don't think anything out there like really exists like it, and that's why I'm really proud of it. And I think I think it already has helped a lot of people, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback on it. So yeah, if you want to pick it up, it's on Barnes and Noble. I have links in my bios and everything, but it's a very fun experience, and you can learn everything you possibly want to know about grounding. Everything that we've talked about in this podcast, everything I've talked about in previous podcasts, it's all in that book.
Mm-hmm. Where can people find you, brother?
Yeah. So website would be, I have two websites. So thegroundedathlete.com. That's going to be my main website. I have all of my blog posts. I have new stuff that isn't in any of the books that I've been putting out that are on my blog post. I have links to all my podcasts, all the videos that I've made on that website, links to the store where you can get sandals or shoes or what have you. Gosh, what else do I have on there? I have a lot of things on that website. Go check it out. Oh, and all the research that's involved with grounding. I have a link for that. You can look into all the research on it, dive into that. And then the other website is olympusearthwear.com. That's more of like a strictly store. You just want to go to the store and check some of those things out. You can go to that. And then my main social medias are going to be Twitter or X. On there, it's Earthpapi, where I tweet anything from, comprehensive summaries of things and good threads about grounding to memes and stuff like that, because I like to do that. And then Instagram as well. Instagram is The Grounded Athlete, Earthpapi. You can find a lot of my content on there. And then YouTube, if you want to look at all the videos that I posted over the last 5 years about grounding. So perfect.
Yeah. Why do we have stitches on our balls? Question.
Man, it's proof of creation, proof of a maker.
Yeah. Perfect design, brother.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Rob, I really appreciate your time, brother. I would love to have you back for part 2. I will definitely be picking up volume 3. And the installation is gay shirt. That is solid. I'll probably get that in each color. And again, man, thank you for your brain. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for sharing everything. And clearly, again, this is your purpose. So hopefully you get more people in your army to fight this monster, this
Absolutely.
beast.
Yeah, James, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you for inviting me on.
Got you, brother. God bless, man.